Comparison is something almost everyone experiences. You compare your success to others. You compare your appearance, your progress, your relationships, and sometimes others compare you to someone else. Hindu philosophy has a lot to say about this, and it offers a very practical way to understand and deal with comparison. First, we need to understand why comparison happens. Comparison comes from identifying yourself with external things, like achievements, status, or recognition. When you define yourself this way, you naturally start measuring yourself against others. But Hindu teachings say that this is a misunderstanding of who you really are. According to Hindu philosophy, your true identity is not your achievements or social position. It is the atman, the inner self, which is not higher or lower than anyone else. When you forget this, comparison begins. You start thinking, they are better than me. I am behind. I am not enough. But from the perspective of the atman, these comparisons don't make sense because the true self is not competing. Now let's look at what the Bhagavad Gita teaches about this. In the Gita, Krishna tells Arjuna to focus on his own duty, his own path, rather than looking at others. There is a powerful idea here. It is better to follow your own path imperfectly than to follow someone else's path perfectly. This directly addresses comparison. When you compare yourself to others, you're often trying to measure your journey using someone else's path. But Hindu philosophy says each person has their own dharma, their own role, responsibilities, and direction in life. So comparing paths creates confusion. For example, imagine two people. One is focused on building a career. The other is focused on family or creativity. If they compare themselves to each other, both may feel inadequate, even though both are following their own path. Comparison creates unnecessary dissatisfaction. Another important teaching relates to desire. In Hindu philosophy, comparison is closely linked to desire and attachment. When you see someone else succeed, it can create desire. I want what they have. If that desire becomes strong, it can turn into frustration or jealousy. In the Bhagavad Gita, this process is explained clearly. Attachment leads to desire. Desire leads to frustration. Frustration leads to disturbance of the mind. So comparison is not just a harmless habit. It directly affects your mental state. Now let's talk about being compared by others. Sometimes people compare you to someone else. Why aren't you like them? They are doing better than you. Hindu philosophy teaches that your worth is not defined by others' opinions. If your sense of self depends on how others compare you, then your confidence will constantly go up and down. Instead, the teachings emphasize inner validation, measuring yourself by your own actions, effort, and alignment with your values. This brings us to an important idea: detachment. Detachment means not allowing your sense of self-worth to depend on external comparisons. It does not mean ignoring feedback or refusing to improve. It means your inner stability does not depend on being better than someone else. You can still grow, learn, and improve, but not from a place of insecurity. Another helpful concept is Maya, the idea that we often mistake temporary things for lasting truth. Comparison is part of this illusion. You see a small part of someone's life, their success, their appearance, their achievements, and you assume that is the full picture. But in reality, everyone has struggles, challenges, and unseen aspects of their life. So comparison is often based on incomplete information. You are comparing your full reality to someone else's visible highlights. Hindu philosophy encourages shifting focus inward. Instead of asking, how do I compare to others? You begin asking, am I acting according to my values? Am I improving over time? Am I fulfilling my responsibilities? This shift changes everything. Now, let's look at some simple practical steps based on these teachings. First, focus on your own path. Remind yourself that your journey is different from others. Your timing, opportunities, and responsibilities are unique. Second, observe comparison without reacting. When you notice yourself comparing, pause. Recognize it as a mental habit, not as truth. Third, reduce attachment to outcomes and status. Instead of chasing recognition, focus on effort and growth. Fourth, practice gratitude. Comparison often makes you ignore what you already have. Gratitude helps bring your attention back to your own life. And finally, remember your deeper identity. You are not just your achievements or failures. You are more than the labels you and others place on you. When you understand this, comparison begins to lose its power. In summary, Hindu philosophy does not support comparison as a meaningful way to measure yourself. It teaches that comparison comes from misunderstanding your identity, attachment to outcomes, and focusing on external validation. Instead, it encourages you to follow your own path, act with awareness, and develop inner stability. When you stop comparing, your mind becomes calmer, your actions become clearer, and your life becomes more focused.